I'm Emily Taylor with Collage Quilter. I have a special project that I'm working on and I want to share the process with you. So I am going to be a grandma for the first time very soon, coming in November. My daughter Amelia, who's behind the camera right now, is expecting her first baby. So I've wanted to make an alphabet quilt for a long time, and this is a perfect excuse for me to really just do what I want to do and make a quilt for this little boy that's coming to our family. And so I want to invite you to follow along as I go through this process of creating this quilt from start to finish, because it's kind of a big project. 26 letters, and I have to figure out how all of these little collages are going to work together, how I'm going to make it happen. So this series is inviting you into kind of the behind the scenes of the design process for me in this making this quilt. So today, let me just kind of show you what's been happening behind me and talk about where I am right now. So to begin, a couple years ago, I discovered that I really love doing these little critters, right? So these collages are old. They've been sitting in my drawer for a long time. And I thought, well, I've got to do 26 letters, so I'll just pull these out. I for iguana, G for goldfish, W for wasp, and that will save me some time. So we may or may not use them. Amelia's not super happy. She doesn't love the iguana, and the other problem with the iguana is that it's very long and kind of an awkward rectangular size. So one thing that right now we're debating is whether we need to make everything the same size, so that each block is the same, or if it's going to be okay for us to do different size blocks and just make it kind of a very scrappy, piecey quilt. And before I get too far into that discussion, I also want to say that if you stick around till the end of this video, hopefully it won't be too long, but I can watch me finishing up the pumpkin, and I'm going to give you some pointers each week. This week it's going to be about making the pumpkin, and then I'll try and release a download version of this cute pumpkin since the fall is coming, and thought that might be a fun little perk for you too. So anyway, one other thing I want to mention. While I will make these available as downloads, and then there will be a complete pattern when the quilt is finished, there will not be a kit. And the reason for that is this quilt is really just for me, and I want to use whatever fabric I want to use. I don't want the constraints of having to use fabric that's in stock. As many of you know, making quilt kits is tricky because I often run out of the fabric and it's not available. So this quilt is also going to be using literally probably hundreds of pieces of fabric between the background palette that I'm working on and all the collages. So there's no way that there's going to be a kit available, but I will teach you along the way how to select fabric for this kit if you want, or this quilt if you want to make this quilt. Okay, so back to it. The main problem right now that I'm trying to decide is, do we do uniform block sizes, or should I go with allowing some blocks, like the acorn block, to be smaller? Amelia and I have been going back and forth. She kind of leans towards wanting to be uniform in the size, which causes problems for things like the lobster. The lobster won't fit into a 14-inch block, and if I get too big, past 14 inches, not only will the quilt be huge, but it will dwarf some of these other little collages that I've created. So this is the design problem that I'm running into right now: how to design a uniform quilt pattern with varying sizes of the collage. So I haven't worked that out yet. That's something that you're going to see. So this week I'll be kind of making some blocks, putting some of the collages on blocks, and see how they work. One block pattern that I really like, that I think I'll be using is a snowball block. I like the way that looks, so that might be what we're doing. I also want to point out kind of my palette, because this is going to be a quilt for a little boy. We really want some blues and greens and reds, we think. So far, I really like this palette. I know Amelia wants red, but we may, I don't know, we've got to discuss a few of these colors that are in here. I want to pull in some brown, of course, different shades of brown. And so anyway, that's that. Amelia, is there anything else that we should talk about as we get started here? Okay, well then now we're going to provide you with a little bit of some tutorial about making this project, and you should be able to find that on collagequilter.com. It will be available as a download very soon, as will, I think we'll make all of them available as downloads as I go, as I get them done. So I'm not making any promises, but that's kind of the plan. So I hope you'll follow along with this series as I kind of go through the ABCs of collage quilting and making this alphabet quilt for my grandbaby. Okay, if you have questions, please leave them in the comments, or you're always free to email me, emily@collagequilter.com. Thank you. All right, folks, I thought that it would be really helpful for you to see, as I'm working, some of the mistakes that I make and some of the tips that I use to help myself get on track. So obviously I think you can tell that this is a pumpkin that I'm working on. I feel like I am making it a little too complex, and I need to kind of go back to the basics. And one thing, let me just show you some areas where I feel like I have lost the story of what's happening. You can't see the sections of the pumpkin very well. And obviously it's underneath my drawing. And so I feel like I need to kind of fix that. There should probably be a section here. You can kind of see it starts and then it kind of fades out. So I need to kind of refine that a little bit. The other tip that I want to share with you that I find to be extremely helpful is when I look at my work through a phone, I can see areas that need some work. And one area in particular that I think is too dark is this right here. You can see it on the phone. So I have to soften the transition between that dark shadow on the pumpkin and what's next to it. So I can either do that by changing out the piece, this really light highlight piece, or I can make that a little less dark in the value that I've selected. So either way, it's helpful to look through my phone, and then my handy dandy tweezers can help me pull out, one of these pieces. Let's maybe start with that. And I also like having this felt mat too, because this piece might come in handy somewhere else, so I'll just stick it there. So anyway, that's one little segment that I wanted to share with you for this week's work on the ABCs of collage quilting. All right, I'm building the snowball block for the pumpkin, and I have a little tip that I want to share. So this is a 14.5-inch square. The smaller squares are 5 inches, and I've put them in the corners. And I'm just stitching. I kind of highlighted this a little bit. I folded them in half so I can see the fold, but I'm not sure if you can see that. But that kind of gives me the stitch line. But the tip that I want to tell you is if you move your needle position just one increment to the right, it will ensure that there's just a smidgen so that when you fold the corner back, it is flush with the edge, and makes a really nice, tidy snowball block. I thought you might be interested to know a little bit about the fabric selection for some of these blocks. The pumpkin, for instance, it's an interesting fabric selection. I wanted to share with you what my process is. So before I begin, I pull together as many fabrics as I think I might need. And even if I don't use all of them, let me talk about what I have selected and why. So I obviously am going for, I need darker fabric, and then the spectrum goes all the way up to the really light. So all of these pieces can be used as transition pieces between the very lightest and the very darkest areas where there are shadows on the pumpkin. You'll also see, in addition to dark to light, I've got some different colors in here. So we go all the way from purple to really dusty reds, very warm, dusty reds, to burnt umber, burnt sienna, and then to these tangerine colors, and then to the very light salmon colors. So ultimately, I just counted how many different fabrics I used in the pumpkin, and take a wild guess, I used 26 different colors in the pumpkin, 26 different fabrics, and that includes the little green patches that are in there. And then there are 9 different fabric selections that I've used in the stem and the leaf. So for a grand total of 35 different pieces. Now, you don't need to incorporate that many. To me, that just is more fun. This is painting with fabric, and it actually is easier if you can pull together more than you might need. The only time I really run into trouble is when I don't feel like I've got the right fabric for creating a shadow that I might need. So that's my tip. Incorporate as much fabric as you can. And the other thing that I want to point out too is I don't use solids. I always will use fabric that has a printed design on it, because I just think it looks more interesting. So there's another tip for you.